Welcome back to the Parsha Show. As always, the Parsha Show is brought to you in conjunction with the Weiss Entertainment Network. 613 on your dial. This week's Parsha is Parshas Beshalach. As you see in the center of the picture, it's the story of Kriyas Yamsuf. It's the story of Bnei Israel crossing the Yamsuf and Hashem splitting the sea. One important note about that is that this story took place on the seventh day of Pesach. When we come to Pesach, the seventh day of Pesach is a day of Yom Tov, a day we don't do muktzah and other things. And part of the reason why it's such an important day is because that was the day that Hashem split the sea. There are groups of Hasidim that have a custom to go out to the water on the seventh night of Pesach and sing Hallel and other things to recognize the fact that that's the day that Hashem took us across the Yam Suf and saved us from the Mitzrayim. The story begins here. So if you see in the picture, there's a fire. There's a fire that did two things. Number one, every night in the Midbar, Bnei Israel was protected by a fire. During the day, they were protected by a cloud, known as the Ananei HaKavod. The other thing that's of note is when the Mitzrayim were chasing them, there was a fire that blocked them from coming through. Just a couple of notes about Yitzias Mitzrayim at the beginning of the Parsha. Number one, Hashem doesn't take them through the land of Plishtim. Hashem said that if they go there and there'll be war immediately, Bnei Israel will get scared and they want to go through Mitzrayim. So they kind of took a longer way, more circuitous way around when they left Mitzrayim. The second important idea is that Moshe made sure that the Atzmos Yosef, the remains of Yosef, was taken out. As we know, he was eventually buried in Shechem. Now, part of our story is that Yosef was the one who gave them the signal, Pakod Yifkod, the siman, the sign that Hashem was going to take them out of Mitzrayim. And then when the leader, which we now know is Moshe, would come and say, take them out of Mitzrayim, they would say, Pakod. If he said, Pakod Yifkod, Bnei Israel will immediately believe him. We know Moshe himself took the effort to make sure that Yosef's body was taken out of Mitzrayim. It's a famous medrash that the Mitzrayim buried in the Nile, and Moshe went to the sea and said, Yosef, reveal yourself to us, rise up, and if not, we are exempt from any promise that we made to take you out of Mitzrayim. Anyway, eventually the remains of Yosef lifted up from the water, and Moshe took out of Mitzrayim with him. And here we have, and we'll see later in Chumash, there's a story where the people that were carrying the Aron Shel Yosef were tamei and could not participate in a korban, and that became an issue. But the bottom line is that in the end, Yosef's remains did go out, and as we said before, eventually he was buried in Shechem. Now, Paro is sitting in his palace. There are no more slaves, no one to do work, no one to build. Everything now they had to hire out. And he said, what were we thinking? How come we let them go? How could we have done such a thing? And he begins to convince the Mitzrayim. And he tells the Mitzrayim that he's going to share the wealth. We're going to take them back, and we're going to take back all the wealth, and Paro is going to spread it out among the Mitzrayim and share it with them. Such a zealousness, such a excitement that Paro showed to go bring back Bnei Yisrael. It says, Vayasor es richbo, that he himself, he didn't ask his servants to prepare his chariot. Paro himself was the one who prepared the chariot. And then and as we said, he convinced the other people to go. And then they got closer, and when he got closer, Bnei Israel became scared. And they went crying to Moshe. You see in the picture, the chariots and the horses coming to chase after Bnei Israel. But in the end, Moshe said, Hashem, stand here and see what Hashem is going to do for you, because you'll never see the Mitzrayim again, ever again. Here we have the picture, as you see, the picture is about Kriyas Yamsuf here. So there's a number of things. So when the Mitzrayim were coming, it says that Moshe davened to Hashem. And Hashem said, Matitzakilai, this is not the time to daven. Tabel b'nei Yisrael v'yisol. Go forward, go into the sea. So we all know that there's a famous medrash that when Bnei Israel came to the Yam Suf, that all of the Shvatim, the heads of the Shvatim, were going to jump in. And there was a big debate, how should they go, how should they proceed? But one Shevet, Yehuda, was led by a man named Nachshon ben Aminadav. Nachshon ben Aminadav was the brother-in-law of Aaron HaKohen. Nachshon ben Aminadav's sister was married to Aaron HaKohen. Anyway, he took the lead. He jumped into the Yam Suf. It says, Bo Mayim Nafesh, that the water was about to drown him. And then at that point, when Hashem saw that the Mesiras Nefesh, the giving of himself that he was willing to do in honor of Bnei Israel, he says Hashem, as we see in the picture, split the Yam Suf. There are different midrashim. Was it split one long thing and everybody walked through, or was it 12 sections and each Shevet had their own section? Different ideas. But we know clear, Bnei Israel hu b'yavashah, as you can see the dry land, the Toch Hayam. And also the other thing the Torah says, the waters became like a wall, as you see here, it's like a wall, and they were able to go in between that. And of course, when the Mitzvahs saw this, they're like, hey, if they can go in, we can go in. Of course, the end of the Mitzrayim was in the sea. All of the chariots and all of the Mitzrayim, they all died in the Yam Suf. We know that the Medrash brings down that many of their wealth and riches rolled up from the Yam Suf. And as soon as Bnei Israel saw what had happened to the Mitzrayim, it says that they sang a special song known as Az Yashir Moshe Bnei Israel, what we call, or what's sometimes called Shirat Hayam. It was the song that was said over the sea. Now, one thing I wanted to point out, that if you look in a Torah at Az Yashir, so you notice on the right side, this is the story, and it's written like a story. But Az Yashir, which is more poetry, is written what's called Levena al Gabe Levena. Here you have a line, and then you have spaces. It's almost written like it's a poem. There's a big discussion in the Gemara exactly how this came about. Did Moshe say every word, and then Bnei Israel repeated the words? Or did Moshe say, Az Yashir Baruch HaKodesh, and Bnei Israel only said, Ashir al Hashem ki go go. We sing out to Hashem because he is so great. The other thing that's worthwhile to mention is the role of the women. It says, Vatikat Miriam HaNeviah et HaTov biyada. It says that Miriam led the women in dance, and she had a drum in her hands. And it says that the women came to greet Miriam and dance with Miriam with all kinds of musical instruments. Rashi brings down that this indicates the special holiness of these women and how much of how righteous they were, that they took musical instruments with them out of Mitzrayim. And the reason for that was because they knew that sometime in the Midbar, in their experience ahead, Hashem is going to perform a miracle that's going to be worthy of them using their musical instruments. So here was our story. The women were dancing with musical instruments, and they were also singing how great Hashem is. Ashir al Hashem ki go go sus v'rachbo Ramov. And Miriam, in a very similar way to Moshe, sang this special song at the Yam Suf. And to highlight its importance, we say the Torah writes it in a poetic way. One other idea about Kriyas Yam Suf is that the Shulchan Aruch writes that anybody who says it with kavana every day, if you say Az Yashir with kavana, all your sins are to be forgiven. And it could be that the idea of that is that because Az Yashir represents the concept of saying, of having Hakara Satol, of recognizing the good that Hashem has done for people and for themselves, particularly in this case. So if a person is able to say Az Yashir every day, or any day that they say Az Yashir with that kavana, how special Hashem was and all the great things that He's done for us, and thank you Hashem, then a certain person is worthy of his sins being forgiven. The other part of the parsha, there are a number of other things that happen. There's a story of a place called Marah. Marah is where the waters were bitter. Moshe threw a stick into the water and sweetened the water, and Hashem commanded them with mitzvahs, Para, Duma, Shabbos, and the idea of having a court. The other idea is they came to a place called Ayanot, where they had where there were 70 springs, and it was also a special place. The other two inyanim in the parsha, I'm sorry, the name of the place was called Elim. The other idea in the parsha is the story of the man. So we know the man had some very strict rules. Rule number one, that it had to be only collected for that day per the number of people in your family. If you collected more, then the snakes would come or the worms would come and it would rot. Second rule, on Friday, Bayom HaShishi, Yilkatu Lechem Yomayim. On Friday, they collected a double portion. And because on Shabbos, the man did not fall. It's also the idea that Dasan and Aviram went out and put out man on Shabbos to show Bnei Israel, and the birds came and ate it. So there's a custom to put out food for birds before the Shabbos. There are a number of things that we learned from the man. Number one, we learned the mitzvah of eating 3 meals, because the pasuk in description of this uses the word eating in the context of Hayom 3 times. We also, as it says here, we cover the challah on Friday night, because the challah reminds us of the man, and we have the man challah covered on the bottom and on top like the man. The third thing is the idea of lechem mishnah, that at every Shabbos and Yom Tov meal we have 2 challahs. Again, is to be symbolic of that idea that the man did not fall on Shabbos. So we have many modern day incorporations of the story into our tradition. I think the last part of the parsha is a description of the war with Amalek. Rashi says that the reason why Amalek was let loose was because Bnei Israel had become weakened in their observance of the Torah. A theme we see in the time of Purim as well, where Bnei Israel was weak in their observance of the Torah, and Haman was able to come upon them and eventually rally Bnei Israel into doing tshuva. So anyway, the story was, as you see in the picture, they went up to the mountain. Aaron and Hur went up to the mountain. If Moshe's hand was held up, Bnei Israel would win. If Moshe's hand was held down, then Chas V'Shalom and Amalek would win. Aaron and Hur went up the mountain to hold Moshe's hand and to make sure that it stayed up. After the war was over, Hashem declared war on Amalek for all time, and said that until Mashiach comes, until Amalek is destroyed, Hashem's name will not be complete. Of course, the connection to Purim is Haman is a descendant of Amalek, and Haman, like the Amalek of old, also wanted to carry out Haman wanted to carry out destruction of the Jewish people, and of course, like the Amalek of old, he was unsuccessful. One last note we should mention is, of course, that Haman being from Amalek leads us to read Parshas Zohar, which is the mitzvah to remember Amalek on the Shabbos before Purim. It's coming up in a few weeks, and Mitzvah Shem, we will listen and again talk about the mitzvah of destroying Amalek, of remembering Amalek and destroying Amalek. Okay, this concludes this week's Parsha video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the pictures. I think the pictures are very revealing about this Parsha, and Hashem will continue. We'll be on the air next week at this time as well. Good Shabbos, and enjoy your weekend.